I want to talk to you about some hindrances to our harvest this morning and correlate that with this man by the name of Samson, because you and I need to understand that God has a whole lot for us, and really the only thing that can keep us from getting all that God has is not the enemy, but it's us. How many of you want to remove every roadblock and get rid of every hindrance in your life in order for you to get your harvest today? If that's you, somebody put your hands together and shout amen. Let's talk about some of these hindrances. One of the first hindrances we're going to look at is one that we just mentioned, and that is unfulfilled vows. When you make a vow, the Bible tells us that we are required to keep that vow. If you make a vow and break a vow, there is a curse that becomes self-imposed on your life. The Bible encourages us to think before we speak and to go through a mental process in our mind before we make a promise, a vow, or a commitment. It is important before we speak, we think about what we're going to do. One of the greatest hindrances to our harvest is when we begin to run our mouths, say things out of our mouths that we are not going to fully commit when the times get tough. By the way, I'll tell you that any promise you make, any vow you commit to, there's going to be some tough times along that road that is going to challenge what you originally said out of your mouth. My God, I want you to hear me. I made a vow when I married my wife. I love my wife. My wife loves me. We have a great marriage, a great life. But I'm going to tell you something. Every day isn't perfect. There are some challenges in marriage. Nobody's here today. There's some challenges that I have to face that can cause at times for you to question the original instruction or the original commitment that you made. You've got to be willing to go back to that moment, to that time, to that place, to that, thing in your mind when you made that commitment and declare, I made a vow and I'm going to keep that vow. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 4 declares, when thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it. That's just not talking about money. Don't think that every vow has to do with giving money. There are some things that are more important than cash. Somebody said, well, what is that, Pastor? I'm going to tell you what it is. It's time. I'll tell you one thing that's a lot more important than money, and that's time. My time is valuable. Where I spend it and who I spend it on is a commodity that I don't have a whole lot of, so I have to use my time wisely. Oh. When you vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it. In other words, don't delay it. Don't put it off. Don't find an excuse or a reason to not do what you said that you would do. There may be times when you make a vow, in order to fulfill that vow, it's going to cost you some of your time, your talent, or your treasure. The Bible goes on to say in Ecclesiastes, for he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. When you make a commitment, when you make a vow, it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we do whatever is necessary to fulfill that vow. I'm telling you, there are some people in this world, there are some people in the church that have not had their harvest come to pass in their life because they have made vows they have been unwilling to keep. We just say anything we want to out of our mouth, not understanding that there is a day of judgment. There is a time of accountability. And a lot of times when we want something from God, the question gets asked, what are you doing? What have you done? Have you fulfilled your own commitments? See, we often want God to do a lot more than what we're willing to do. Unfulfilled vows is something that we need to go back in our life and ask ourselves, what vow did we make that we haven't kept that is keeping us from walking into our destiny? See, until you go back to your last act of disobedience, you can never be thrust into your destiny. You can never be thrust into your future. So a lot of times we can trace the stunting of our spiritual growth back to that place where we made a vow, but we didn't keep that vow. Let me give you another one. You didn't like number one, let's give you number two. Number two, the second thing that keeps you from having your harvest fulfilled is being unequally yoked. When you partner with somebody that God hasn't destined you to be partnered with, when you force the issue because you're lonely, it has a tendency to come back and bite you. I love Samson. Because when you go to Judges 13, 14, 15, you really see somebody who really wanted to do what he wanted to do. Now, thank God we ain't got no people like that this morning here. Thank God all of you are obedient. Say amen. Thank God all of you are spiritual, right? I mean, none of us here struggle with things. In Judges 14, go with me. The Bible said, and Samson went to Timnath and saw a woman. Somebody say Saul. He saw a woman who was a daughter of the Philistines. And he came up and he told his father and his mother, and he said, I've seen a woman. Yeah. Woo! Come on, give me 5, Dad. Mom, I found her. Woo! I saw her with my own 2 eyes, and woo-wee. She's beautiful. How many know everything that looks good on the outside doesn't always end up being good on the inside? Oh, really? That's all the love I'm going to get? That's all the love I'm going to get. And he said, I've seen a woman, the daughters of the Philistines. Now, therefore, get her for me to be my wife. Do what? Hello? I mean, you know when you're in school, you write the little letters. I like you. Do you like me? Yes or no? Circle. Samson wasn't even man enough to go talk to a woman. Woo! That he saw that he was attracted to. He said, hey, Mom and Dad, she is, woo! She's beautiful. Now go get her for me. Go do my dirty work. Go tell her that she's going to be my wife. I can't do it. I don't have the courage. I don't have the guts. She's too pretty. I don't know what his line of thinking was. But notice what Mom and Dad said. Then his father and his mother said unto him, is there never a woman among the daughters of thy own brethren, among all the people which thou goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said unto his father, get her for me, for she pleaseth me well. Did you not hear your father's advice? Did you not hear what he just said? Obviously not, because one sign of immaturity is you keep repeating stuff that you want that you know you should not have. See, being unequally yoked, whether you don't like it or not, it doesn't have to do with color. Unequally yoked has to do with Christian character. Go ahead and clap. Doesn't have to do with race. Doesn't have to do what's on the outside. It has to do with on the inside. His father and his mother, the Bible said in verse 4, knew it was not of the Lord that he sought an occasion against the Philistines. For at that time, the Philistines had dominion over Israel. Then Samson went down, his father and his mother, to Timnath and came to the vineyard. And behold, a young lion roared against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid, and he had nothing in his hand, but he had told not his father or his mother what he had done. When he went down, he talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. He said, I not only like what I see, I like the little bit that I hear. Too often we get unequally yoked, not understanding that being unequally yoked with others can hinder our harvest. Proverbs 13:20 said, he that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. See, fools don't consider the consequences. Fools rely on their own strength. Fools don't consider how their actions can affect others. Fools think temporarily and not permanently. Fools take their own advice and never overcome sin. And fools never listen to the wise counsel of their leaders. You'll mess things up quick in your life when you begin to go after what you want, what you see what you see that may be pleasing to your eye, but may not be pleasing to God. Another reason that Samson had his harvest hindered was because of unchanging impatience. Samson was impatient. Notice what he said. I want her now. I don't want to wait. I don't want to put this thing off. I want it now. Well, you better be careful what drives you, what your passions are that cause you to want something now. Usually God makes us wait because it's in the process of waiting that God refines us and prepares us for what He wants to bring to us. Sometimes we get things prematurely and we're not ready to handle the responsibility that comes along with the things that God gives. Is anybody here? You're not ready to handle the things that God gives. You think you are, but you ain't ready to handle it. Why? Because you're impatient and it's unchanging. You know, the closer you get to God, the more you pursue Him, the more you ought to become like Him. So you know what? You may not ever be perfect in the area of patience. You may never be perfect in developing the fruit of patience in your life, but you ought to learn how to be a little bit better this year than you were last year. Lamentations 3:25 said, the Lord is good unto them that wait for Him. The Bible said there is seed time and harvest time, but that season between seed time and harvest time is called waiting time. It's the most difficult time when you plant the seed and then you wait for the harvest. Sometimes it takes a lot longer. You ever buy those little packages that you put, in the springtime out in the back in your own private garden at your home, and on there it'll say it takes this long to come to pass? It'll tell you on those packages. When you plant this seed, from 4 to 6 weeks from the moment you plant it, you can expect your harvest. Wouldn't that be wonderful if God did that for us? I mean, wouldn't that be awesome if God said, just use the prophet of the house, gave us a word, called us on the phone and said, listen, from the moment that seed was planted, 4 to 6 weeks, it'd be great, but God doesn't do it that way. Why? Because it requires no faith. And sometimes if He was to put instructions or if He was to put a harvest date on there, it would be so far off in our future that we would get discouraged from the very beginning. Because we're always in a hurry. God is never fast enough for most of us. Whenever we plant a seed, you know what? We want it to come to pass instantly, but it doesn't always happen that way because God is more interested in building character inside of us than He is in meeting our needs and fulfilling our promises. It's what you do and how you handle yourself in the waiting time that affects your harvest. You can plant the seed, but what are you doing in the waiting time? Are you watering? Or are you wasting your time by doubting and getting discouraged? Waiting time is hard time. Waiting time is difficult time. Because you come, you get prayed for, God puts a deposit, a seed is planted, you plant a seed, and you're like, man, I want to see this thing come to pass, and God doesn't always do it on our time frame. And it's what you do in that waiting time that affects your harvest, because between conception and completion, there must be consecration. One of the greatest hindrances to our harvest is that we're unwilling to wait. That unchanging impatience, it drives us. Frustration, doubt, unbelief causes us to abort the seed and ultimately kill our harvest. Can I give you another one? Notice the undigested counsel. His father and mother told him what to do, but he did it anyway. When God hears the cry, have you ever got counsel but didn't listen to it? Anybody? Just raise your hand. I'm not going to ask you specifically what, but somebody counseled you, but you did the total opposite. If you've done it once, many people probably still feel the effects of a bad decision that they have not listened to somebody over them when it came to good counsel, and they didn't digest the counsel that was given. You know what most people here do? When they don't like something they put in their mouth, they spit it out. Just think about that for a minute. What do you do when you don't force yourself to eat something? You taste it, I'll taste it, but if I don't like it, I'm going to spit it out. That's the way people are with counseling. I'm going to go into pastor. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to ask him a few questions. And then when I give you an answer, and here's the thing with most people. You know what most people do? They come in and they smile while I'm giving it, and then when they leave, they spit it out. Oh, it gets quiet. I'm not talking about nobody specific yet. Just say amen. One of the most frustrating things as a pastor is when you want to help people more than they want to help themselves. And they come and get advice, and you want to put them on the right path, but they end up doing what they want to do anyway. You're not going over there. Can't you find somebody over here? Why do you got to visually, let somebody draw you away from your own lust and entice you? That's not right. I want it anyway. When God wants to bless you, He often puts a person in your life who gives you a word. So be careful about the people you allow in and the words you allow to be spoken in and over your life. Because when you reject the messenger, when you reject the counseling from someone who God sends, you reject God Himself. I've told you before, when God wants to give you a miracle, a healing, or blessing, He doesn't give you a miracle, healing, or blessing. He gives you a word. He doesn't always show up in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, Jerry." He uses somebody to bring it into your life. The deliverer that He uses to bring into your life, to give you a word that can change the momentum of your life, it must be careful on your part to receive and not reject. Can I give you one more? Ungodly habits are a deterrent to your destiny. They're a hindrance to your harvest. He was controlled by lust. He wanted to please the flesh. He married a foreign unbeliever. He was with a harlot, a prostitute. He drank wine at a wedding. He touched a dead body. He laid his head in Delilah's lap and allowed his hair to be cut. In Judges 15, if you're still with me, read it. He had some things that he needed to overcome that he was sometimes unwilling to really address in his life. He was lustful. He was arrogant. He was prideful. He rejected godly wisdom. He wasn't a very good son. He was also a workaholic. Notice in chapter 15 of Judges, but it came to pass within a while after, in the time of the wheat harvest, that Samson visited his wife with a kid. And he said, I will go into my wife into the chamber. But her father would not suffer him to go in. And the father said, I verily thought that thou hadst utterly hated her. Therefore I gave her to thy companion. What happened? Here's what happened. He was working. It was harvest time. He was out there working. Look at me. He was out there working. There's sometimes, man, you got to work harder than others. You may be in a business that you work harder than others. Just because you work harder at one season than you do another season doesn't give you a right to put God or your family on the back burner. My God, somebody needs to clap your hands. You want me to quit? But I'm not going to, because I'm going to tell you something. We make excuses, and then we wonder why things happen. Well, if you aren't protecting it, somebody's got to. Be careful. Don't use working as an excuse to put your family on the back burner. It ought to be God, then your spouse. Not God and your kids. It ought to be God and your spouse.